Today we're going to be demonstrating how to do a streak for isolation from a broth culture to an auger plate. And let me explain all the materials that we have out here today. We have a Bunsen burner that is obviously on. We have our wire inoculating loop that is straight, and the loop itself, it does not have any breaks in it or no burrs, no sharp points. We have an auger plate. This happens to be a Standard Methods auger plate. And normally I would label this completely with all the materials that I've told you to label your plates with before, but for this purposes of this demonstration, I'm not going to be labeling this plate. And here's our simulated bacterial culture in a test tube. When you are working with your unknowns, we will give you a mix of two bacteria. The very first thing you'll need to do is separate those bacteria on a streak for isolation. So because I am left-handed, and I will be demonstrating this left-handed, but if you're right-handed, you can reverse these as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hold the test tube here in my non-dominant hand. So in my case, it's going to be my right hand. Notice that I'm holding the test tube the same way that we have been trained with our aseptic transfer technique. Holding it at a 45-degree angle. Our cap is loose here. Up against my fingers, I've got the butt of the test tube up against the palm of my hand, and I'm holding it down with my thumb, so I have good control over this. Now I'm going to take my loop and I'm going to hold it in my dominant hand, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to sterilize my loop, holding the loop at the top of the light blue flame. It sterilizes the loop and the wire above it. I'm going to let that cool for a second. And while that's cooling, I'm going to remove the cap from my broth culture using my pinky. I'm going to flame the mouth of the tube. And now I'm going to stick the inoculating loop into the broth culture to grab a loop full of bacteria. I'm going to flame the mouth again, put the cap back on, and I can put this back in the test tube rack. And now I'm going to lift my auger plate up, and I am going to take the bacteria that I have on my loop, and I'm going to spread them out in this loading zone. So we can go back and forth as many times as we need to here to make sure all the bacteria come off of our loop and they're spread over this small section here. We put the plate back down, flame our loop, and after I'm done flaming the loop, I'm going to let it cool. Now we're going to take the plate and we're going to turn it just a little bit. And I'm going to see where my loading section is on the reflection here. And now I'm going to take the loop and I'm going to cut across it about 3 times here. Once, twice, 3 times. And then we're going to spread that out into the next quadrant. I'm going to flame my loop again to sterilize it. And after it's cooled, I'm going to start in the second section where I was, the quadrant 2, and we're going to run the loop perpendicular to our previous lines. So we're going to go back about once, twice, 3 times, maybe 4, and we're going to go into quadrant 3. Flame our loop. And lastly, I'm going to go from quadrant 3 and pull into quadrant 4. So we're going to go perpendicular to our previous set of lines. I'm going to pull once, twice, 3, maybe 4 times, and then into the 4th quadrant. And sterilize our loop. And after we're done sterilizing our loop, we can just lay the loop down to cool. And I want to show you something. I think I'll be able to pick this up on here. As we look at the plate, I'm going to hold this at an angle where you can see the reflection of the light off the surface of the auger. So I'm actually going to use our loop for a second to be able to show you some of the segments here. You can see where we've loaded everything originally here. And then when we flamed after loading, we flamed and came back here to collect some more bacteria, come about 3 times off of here, and we pulled this direction. And you can see that the lines do not cross each other. We flamed again, turned our plate a little bit, and we go perpendicular to our previous lines, and we pull into quadrant 3, flame one more time, and then perpendicular to quadrant 3, and we pull into quadrant 4, making sure not coming back into our loaded section here. So one of the things to note is you don't want your lines to cross, and you don't want your lines to go back into your prior section, because we're trying to thin the bacteria out throughout these quadrants so that hopefully we can get isolation. That is how you do a streak for isolation. I will show you some variations on this technique as demos in lab, but this is primarily the technique that we will be using to try and get a streak for isolation with our bacteria.